It's ironic that music performers spend years trying to get famous. Most of them fail.
Right. And then for those few that actually get famous, the fame turns into a prison.
I mean, I think universal adoration sounds like the ultimate dream, right? But imagine if every time you walked out your front door, a mob of thousands literally tried to tear your clothes off.
Yeah, it sounds terrifying. You would just stop leaving the house.
Exactly. And by November 25th, 1965, walking down a public street in daylight was just physically impossible for these four guys from Liverpool.
Oh, the isolation was absolute. Think about the sheer logistical absurdity of it. You are in your early 20s, you have unlimited money, but you can't even, go buy a holiday present for your family.
Right, like a normal person would.
Exactly. They literally had to use Harrods, the massive London department store, and run a covert after-hours operation.
Wait, they kept the whole store open just for them?
Yep, management locked the massive public doors and let the band wander the empty, silent aisles just to do their Christmas shopping. Right. Buying a simple scarf took military-level tactical planning, advanced security sweeps, and secret entrances.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the contrast between that heavily guarded existence and where they started is just staggering.
Oh, completely. It's night and day.
Right. Just a few years earlier in Hamburg, Germany, they were this sweaty, working rock band playing the Reeperbahn Red Light District. They played on stages sometimes made of stacked wooden crates.
Yeah, playing 8-hour sets to rowdy sailors and gangsters who, frankly, did not care who was on stage.
And they forged that ferocious, muscular identity through brute repetition, right? Having to be louder and faster than the chaos in the room.
Which is exactly what propelled them to the top of the charts. But when the global hysteria of Beatlemania hit, that raw energy was literally swallowed by a wall of sound.
Because the crowd was louder than the music.
Way louder. What's fascinating here is the sheer physical limitation of the mid-1960s. Stadium rock infrastructure just did not exist yet.
So when they played to 50,000 people at an open-air baseball venue like Shea Stadium, what were they playing through?
Essentially, public address systems. We are talking about the exact same tinny horn speakers baseball announcers used to call out batting orders.
Wait, hold on. They were the biggest band in the world, generating millions. Why not just buy a better sound system to overpower the crowd?
Because the technology literally did not exist on planet Earth yet. Stage monitors weren't a thing. They were plugging into 100-watt amplifiers.
Which is nothing for a stadium.
Exactly. Meanwhile, 50,000 screaming teenagers in a concrete bowl can generate over 115 decibels. That is the acoustic equivalent of standing directly next to a roaring jet engine.
Wow. So physics just dictated that wooden amps couldn't beat the human roar. From their perspective on the stage, they were performing in a vacuum of white noise.
Yeah. Ringo Starr talked about how terrifying it was. He could not hear the guitars or the vocals.
How do you even keep a beat?
He had to, physically watch the body movements of Paul McCartney, John Lennon, and George Harrison.
Just watching their shoulders sway.
Yep, watching their shoulders and the tapping of their boots just to guess where they were in the song.
That's insane.
Ringo Starr said nobody in those stadiums actually came to hear them play. They came to release tension. The music was just an excuse to gather.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. You might assume being the most beloved people on Earth offers some kind of safety net. But the fame actively turned them into targets.
Absolutely.
The crying love of 1964 curdled into a dangerous daily siege by 1966. The world tour that year was just a string of escalating crises.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that 1966 tour was where the illusion of safety shattered completely. It shifted from accidental crowd crushes to coordinated hostility.
Starting in Japan, when they were booked to play the Nippon Budokan in Tokyo.
Right, a venue built specifically for traditional martial arts. Nationalist groups considered it sacred ground, so a Western pop group playing loud rock music sparked immense controversy.
There were credible threats of violence before they even landed, so the police response was a draconian lockdown.
Like astronauts trapped in a space capsule. They were confined to a single hotel suite surrounded by armed guards. They couldn't walk the streets. They just stared out the window of a luxury prison.
And yet, that was highly organized compared to the absolute nightmare in Manila a few weeks later.
Oh, July 1966 in the Philippines, they flew in to play for over 80,000 people.
So how does a standard tour stop turn into a dangerous international incident?
It all centered on an invitation. First Lady Imelda Marcos invited them to a breakfast reception at the presidential palace.
And their manager politely declined, right, to avoid political endorsements.
Exactly. He cited their strict policy of avoiding government receptions, but the Marcos regime viewed it as a profound, deliberate public insult.
And the retaliation was incredibly swift.
The very next day, they woke up to find their entire government-provided security detail had simply vanished.
Vanished.
Hotel staff suddenly refused to bring them food or answer calls. Bomb threats were actively being called in.
I have to push back here, though. They have immense wealth. Why not just hire private security to get safely to the airport?
Because when a state apparatus turns against you, private security means nothing. The military and police controlled the movement. So the band had to haul their own heavy equipment down the hotel stairs in tropical heat.
Just making a desperate run for the airport.
Right. And the terminal was a gauntlet. An angry mob of loyalists had gathered. John Lennon and Ringo Starr were physically assaulted, pushed, kicked, and spat on.
While government officials reportedly just stood by and watched.
Yeah, some officials even bragged about manhandling them later. To even get flight clearance, they had to surrender a massive portion of their concert earnings.
Barely escaping like that, it had to profoundly break something inside them. How do you possibly cope mentally when your global popularity provokes actual mob violence?
You retreat inward. And keep in mind, there was no widespread public discourse about mental health back then. Paul McCartney later admitted they were all dealing with severe mental health struggles.
But they lacked the vocabulary to express it.
Exactly. So they used humor as a shield, joking their way through hostile press conferences. But John Lennon was going through what he later called his Fat Elvis period.
Eating and drinking excessively, feeling entirely lost in his own image.
When your face is printed on millions of lunchboxes, your identity is entirely commodified. He felt a profound alienation from the person in the mirror.
Which makes the song Help so much darker. We know it was a literal cry for help from a man who felt he was drowning.
Yes, the cognitive dissonance is staggering. Standing on a stage in front of 50,000 screaming people, essentially begging for psychological rescue.
And the crowd cheers wildly because they think it's just a catchy pop hook. They were drowning in plain sight.
The upbeat, bouncy tempo perfectly masked those desperate lyrics. It's the perfect metaphor for their public existence then. A bright surface hiding massive inner despair.
And that despair hit critical mass when they returned to America. The 1966 U.S. tour felt cursed before it even started.
It was entirely overshadowed by a single quote. Months earlier in the UK, John Lennon made an offhand sociological observation that church attendance was shrinking and stated the band was more popular than Jesus.
Which barely made a ripple in the UK.
Right. But an American teen magazine reprinted it out of context right before the tour. The reaction across the American South and Midwest was explosive.
Radio stations enacted complete bans on their music. Citizens organized massive public bonfires to burn their records.
The Ku Klux Klan organized pickets outside their concert venues, nailing their albums to wooden crosses. They were receiving highly credible death threats on a daily basis.
The atmosphere went from joyful chaos to dread. John Lennon had to hold a press conference in Chicago to apologize.
And if you watch the footage, he doesn't look rebellious.
No, he looks terrified. He looks like a young man realizing a mob might actually kill him over a misunderstood sentence.
The joy of performing was entirely extinguished by fear. They were just moving targets waiting for an attack.
Which culminated in Memphis. Deeply tense atmosphere, daily death threats, and suddenly a sharp, loud bang echoes through the stadium.
Someone had set off a firecracker in the crowd. But in that split second, they all genuinely believed one of them had just been shot.
Imagine the sheer terror. Your heart stops, and you're scanning the stage to see which of your best friends falls to the floor.
The relief of realizing it was a firecracker must have been huge, but the trauma of fully expecting to be murdered on stage was the final nail in the coffin.
You cannot create art when your primary concern is basic physical survival. From that moment on, they were just going through the motions.
Playing rushed, 30-minute sets, rushing through songs for crowds they couldn't hear anyway, constantly looking over their shoulders.
And what makes it so profoundly tragic is that musically they were evolving at light speed. They had just released the album Revolver.
Full of incredibly complex studio production, backwards tape loops, and intricate arrangements.
But because of those primitive 100-watt sound systems, it was literally impossible to play the new material live.
The stage technology hadn't caught up to the recording studio, so they were stuck playing old pop hits, pretending to be the Mop Tops of 1964.
while their creative minds were focused on the future. And on August 29th, 1966, at Candlestick Park in San Francisco.
It wasn't glamorous. It was a cold, violently windy, foggy night. The stadium was only half full.
There was no grand press release announcing it was the end, but internally, they knew.
Paul McCartney actually asked their press officer to capture a rough audio recording of the performance.
He wanted a memento. They took cameras onto the stage, documenting the end of an era, while the freezing crowd remained completely oblivious.
They played a quick 11-song set, walked off the stage, climbed straight into an armored car, and drove away.
On the flight out of San Francisco, the exhaustion finally broke.
George Harrison let out a long sigh and famously declared, "That's it, I'm not a Beatle anymore." He didn't mean quitting the band, just that the touring life was dead.
It was a quiet, shared resolution. So what does this all mean for their legacy? Quitting the road was an absolute act of self-preservation.
They had to walk away from the live stage to save themselves as human beings and as musicians.
By locking the heavy doors of the recording studio, they finally found a sanctuary where the screams couldn't reach them.
And that retreat birthed their greatest creative era. Free from the physical danger and the limitations of public address speakers, they had the time to build the vast sonic landscapes they were hearing in their heads.
Leading directly to the creation of masterpieces like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, The White Album, and Abbey Road.
They completely revolutionized modern music in that studio. But the scars from those touring years never truly faded.
The relentless pressure had created permanent psychological fractures. Even years later, Paul McCartney talked about struggling with deep depression and heavy drinking after the band ultimately split.
Describing the breakup as grieving the agonizing loss of lifelong friends.
They had to kill the phenomenon of Beatlemania in order to survive it, handing the world its greatest music in the process.
But the machine that made them legends wore them down to the bone.
Which leaves you with something profound to consider. We look at those later studio albums as the absolute pinnacle of artistic achievement. But was that incredible creative explosion actually worth the devastating personal and psychological price they paid to achieve it?
That is the ultimate paradox of their history. The art demanded a sacrifice that almost destroyed the artists.
Until next time, when you listen.
Your mind conducts its own symphony.
Hey, do you like free stuff?
Yeah, of course, especially when it's Beatles stuff.
Well, you're in luck, because our new book, Beatles Rewind, is free today on Amazon and YouTube.
Huh. That massive book we just wrote called Beatles Rewind, Essential Stories of John, Paul, George, and Ringo, and the music that never gets old.
That's the one. We're giving it away today.
Are you crazy? I worked my ass off on that book, and now you're giving it away.
Guilty as charged. So there's two ways to get it free. You can download the ebook free from Amazon, or listen to the entire audiobook, all 12 hours, free on YouTube.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I forgot. Okay, we'll put the links in this video description for the free ebook and audiobook. And or you, listening, if you have a browser handy. For the book, just go to BeatlesRewindBook.com. That will get you to the Amazon book page.
Right. And for the audiobook, you can go to BeatlesAudio.com, and that will get you the YouTube audiobook.
Anything else you want to give away today?
That's it for today.
Oh, okay. Beatles forever.